My granddaughter's fiancé stood in my garage, arms crossed, and told me my late husband's tools were an eyesore and needed to be gone before the engagement party, donated, sold, whatever, just gone by Saturday. I looked at that workbench Frank built with his own 2 hands 40 years ago and said, "Sure, Grayson, I'll take care of it." What I didn't say was that I'd already taken care of a few other things. He just didn't know it yet. Okay, let me rewind. I'm Ruth Calloway, 71, widow, and apparently, according to my granddaughter Bailey's fiancé, a walking liability to the family image. Bailey's my son's kid, raised half of her summers myself after her mom passed when she was 9. I taught that girl to drive stick, to file her own taxes, to never let a man talk over her at a dinner table. Funny, how that last lesson didn't quite stick when it came to Grayson Beck. Grayson comes from money, or he used to. His family ran Beck and Holloway, a boutique investment firm that had, let's just say, seen better decades. His father Warren still walked around like the name meant something, but anybody who actually looked at their books knew Beck and Holloway had been running on fumes and a line of credit for 3 years running. I knew because I'd been that line of credit. Anonymously, through a holding entity with a name boring enough nobody ever asked twice, Millbrook Bridge Partners. Frank and I built our money the unglamorous way. Not real estate flips, not some flashy startup. We bought struggling small manufacturers in the 80s and 90s, fixed the operations, kept the workers, sold or held. By the time Frank passed 6 years ago, we had stakes in 11 companies, half a dozen commercial buildings, and one very quiet habit: bailing out family friends' businesses without ever putting our names on the paperwork. Warren Beck was one of those friends. Had been since he and Frank played poker on Tuesdays back in the 90s. Grayson had no idea. To him, I was just Bailey's grandmother, the one with the outdated minivan, and the garage full of clutter, and the cardigans he'd definitely rolled his eyes at more than once when he thought I wasn't looking. So, back to the garage. It started 3 weeks before the engagement party. Grayson and Bailey came over for Sunday dinner, and somewhere between the pot roast and dessert, Grayson mentioned, real casual, like he was doing me a favor, that his parents were hosting the engagement party at their country club and it'd mean a lot if things looked a certain way. Polished? Elevated? His words. Bailey laughed it off. I didn't say much. 2 days later he showed up unannounced while Bailey was at work, walked straight into my garage like he owned the place, and started listing everything wrong with it. The workbench, Frank's old tackle boxes, my gardening tools hanging on the pegboard. It just doesn't send the right message, Ruth, when people come by before the party. You understand. I did understand. I understood plenty. Here's the thing about being underestimated for 71 years. You get real good at keeping your face still while your mind does laps. I smiled, told him I'd think about it, and shut the garage door behind him once his car pulled away. That night I called my accountant Priscilla, who'd handled Millbrook Bridge's books for almost 15 years. "Pull the Beck and Holloway file," I told her. "I want the full exposure numbers by Friday." Turns out Beck and Holloway owed Millbrook Bridge just under $2.3 million across 2 loans and a revolving credit line, both personally guaranteed by Warren Beck, both up for their annual renewal review in exactly 4 weeks. 4 weeks that conveniently landed right after the engagement party. I didn't do anything drastic. Not yet. I just stopped being quiet about who I was. The morning of the party, I wore the cardigan, the exact one, drove the minivan too, right up to the valet stand at Chestnut Hollow Country Club, and let the kid in the little vest give it the once-over he clearly wanted to give it. I didn't care. I had somewhere to be. Inside, Warren Beck spotted me before I'd even made it past the coat check. His whole posture changed. That specific kind of stiff you get when someone important shows up somewhere they weren't expected. "Ruth, I didn't realize you'd be... Is everything with the account?" "Everything's fine, Warren. I'm here for my granddaughter." Relief, then confusion. He genuinely didn't know Bailey and Grayson knew each other, let alone that they were engaged. Small world gets smaller when you're the one quietly holding it together. Grayson found me by the hors d'oeuvres table an hour in, looking a little too pleased with himself in his tailored jacket. "Ruth, glad you could make it. Everything looking good?" A pointed little glance, like he was checking his instructions had been followed. "The garage is spotless," I told him, which was true. I donated exactly nothing, just moved everything into the shed out back, which he'd never once bothered to walk around and see. He didn't need to know that part yet. The toast happened around 9. Warren stood up, glass in hand, talking about legacy and family and how proud he was watching Grayson step into leadership at the firm. How in 6 months, once the restructuring was final, Grayson would officially take over as managing partner. Big applause. Bailey glowing next to him. I clapped too, genuinely happy for her, even with everything else sitting in my chest. Here's what nobody in that room understood except me, and as of that night, Priscilla. A restructuring like the one Warren was describing needed lender sign-off, needed Millbrook Bridges sign-off, specifically, since our credit line covered nearly 40% of the firm's operating capital, and renewal review was in 4 weeks. I let the party finish, didn't make a scene, didn't pull Warren aside dramatically, or make some big speech at the mic. That's not how I operate, and frankly, that's not the lesson I wanted Grayson to learn. I wanted him to learn it the way grown-ups learn things, through consequences that show up later, quietly, exactly where you didn't think to look. 2 weeks after the party, Bailey called me crying. Grayson had asked her to hold off on picking wedding invitations because things at the firm were weird right now. He wouldn't tell her why, just that his dad had been in back-to-back calls with lawyers and some outside advisor nobody would name. "Should I be worried, Grandma?" "Tell me what's going on with the two of you first," I said. "Forget the firm for a minute." She told me things. How Grayson had started commenting on what she wore to his family's events. How he'd once told her, half joking, that she'd need to class up a bit before she met his parents' friends. How he'd been the one pushing to keep me, and my aesthetic, his word according to Bailey, as far from the wedding planning as politely possible. I'd heard enough. The following Monday, I sat down with Priscilla and our attorney, Desmond, and reviewed the renewal terms properly for the first time in years, instead of just rubber stamping them out of loyalty to an old poker buddy. Then I asked for a meeting, not with Warren, with Grayson specifically, since he was the one about to be handed the keys. He showed up to Millbrook Bridges' offices assuming he was meeting some anonymous committee about routine paperwork. Warren hadn't told him whose name was actually on the loans. Warren, to his credit, still didn't fully grasp how personal this had gotten either. I was sitting at the head of the table when Grayson walked in, wearing the cardigan again, as it happens. I hadn't planned that. It just felt right. His face did something complicated. Recognition, confusion, and then, slowly, the exact same dawning horror I imagine crosses your face when you realize the woman whose garage you criticized controls 40% of your father's company. "Ruth, what? You're on the committee?" "I am the committee, more or less. Sit down, Grayson." I laid it out plainly, no theatrics. Millbrook Bridge Partners would renew Beck and Holloway's credit line, the firm's employees didn't deserve to pay for anyone's ego, and Warren had been a decent friend to Frank for 30 years. But the managing partner transition, the one that would hand Grayson the reins in 6 months? That needed a different conversation, one about character, and how a person treats people who can't do anything for them, one his father, frankly, should have had with him years ago. "This isn't about the garage," I told him. "It was never about the garage. It's about what you assumed you could say to someone because you decided she didn't matter." I didn't cancel the loan. I didn't blow up the wedding. I'm not in the business of scorched earth. I've buried a husband. I know what actually matters by the time you're my age. What I did was make the transition contingent on a 90-day leadership review run by an outside advisor Desmond selected, focused specifically on how Grayson treated staff, vendors, and yes, family. Warren agreed immediately. Turns out he'd had his own quiet concerns about his son's temper for a while and just hadn't known how to raise it without a nudge. Grayson sat through that review. Actually sat through it, to his credit. Didn't storm out, didn't call lawyers, didn't try to go around me through Warren. Whether that was growth or just self-preservation, I honestly couldn't tell you yet. Maybe both. People are usually a little of both. Bailey and I had a long talk of our own, not long after. She moved the wedding date back, not off back, gave herself room to actually watch who Grayson became under pressure instead of who he performed at parties. That's a distinction more people should make before signing anything. As for the tools, Frank's tackle boxes are back on the pegboard. The workbench never left. And if Grayson Beck ever walks into my garage again, he's welcome to say whatever he'd like about the clutter. I own the shed it's sitting in, and 40% of the business card in his wallet. I think I can live with a little clutter. Tell me down below. Would you have handled Warren's loan the same way, or pulled it the second you found out?